Welcome to the Sean Newman podcast. I'm joined by Sheila Gunn Reid from Rebel News. Thanks for hopping on.
Oh, I'm very glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
I think we don't have to get into all the small talk. We might as well just hop right to the big news here in Alberta. The big news being the sentencing of Tony Olenek, Chris Carbert. I'm just gonna throw it over to you, and you just walk me through everything.
How far do you want to go back?
Hey, you go
I guess
as
back
far.
to the beginning.
Sure. Well, it
Yeah.
don't matter to me. Like
I guess
on this side, Sheila, sorry to hop in one more time and then I'm gonna let her
please.
talk, folks.
Yeah.
Hey. On this side, we've had Tony Olenek on. We've had different people from all different spots on this sucker on. And probably the only person I hadn't had on was yourself, actually, when I think about it. So you can go as far back as you like. We got plenty of time this morning.
Well, the thing is, Rebel News journalists have been there from the very beginning, including uh, the day or the day after the blockade started. We had journalists there who witnessed the arrest of the Coutts Four, or at least most of the Coutts Four. We were there to capture that. And then we've had journalists in the courtroom covering this trial, pre-trial motions, again, from the very beginning. If it wasn't Ezra, it was my uh, colleague Robert. It's been me very recently heading down to Lethbridge to cover this case. But just Coles Notes version, these guys were not really part of the Coutts blockade. They were sort of adjacent to it, and they were arrested in a major RCMP operation, including undercover operators, in February of 2022. They were initially charged with conspiracy to commit murder, multiple and differing weapons related charges, and of course, the standard you've annoyed the police in a public place, mischief. Now, they've been incarcerated, I guess today is 940 days by the judge's calculation yesterday. Um, they were held without bail the entire time, which is largely unheard of in this country because the default is you qualify for bail unless you don't. These guys, as the court heard yesterday, had multiple willing and able sureties with strong ties to the community, and yet they were not given bail. They were the two of them, Jerry Morin and Chris Lysak. They pled out to mischief and their weapons charges, and then they walked free. They were sentenced to time served. Anthony Olenek, Chris Carbert, they went to trial. They were acquitted on the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, specifically against police officers. However, they were convicted on their weapons-related offenses and, of course, mischief. Yesterday in court, they were sentenced. Felt like they were being sentenced for the crime they were actually acquitted of, if I had to be honest with you. And I think that's why you have me here. They were sentenced to 6 and 6.5 years, respectively, for the weapons charges. Chris Carbert had a previous prohibition for 10 years. So when he was in possession of a firearm, that's a big no-no. And another 6 months to be served concurrent for him, for both of them actually, on the mischief charges. So they were sentenced to incarceration on the mischief charges. It'll just be served concurrently. Anthony Olenek got 6 years on his weapons charge and then an additional tack on consecutive for having pipe bombs, not at the protest, but at his home when his home was raided by police. So that's what happened yesterday. Now they were given credit for 1.5 days per each that they were held in pretrial custody, which is kind of the standard. So the judge gave them credit for 1,409 days of pretrial incarceration. That's approaching 4 years. By my calculations, quickly in the courtroom yesterday, that leaves them with 2.6 years, so 2 years, 8 months remaining behind bars. And by all accounts, they've been exemplary prisoners. It feels weird to say that. So they should qualify for parole, mandatory release, after 2/3 of that sentence. So that's the Coles notes of what went down in court yesterday.
Okay. So, does any of us believe they're going to get two-thirds sentences when none of the rest of that made just, I mean, like, I understand what you're saying, but like, and I don't know, like, I don't know how much you want to comment on this, but I look at it and I go, okay, the pipe bombs were nowhere near the protest. And I've had different people on talking about this and what was submitted in court and what was known outside of court. And I'm just like, this hurts my brain, right? How can somebody walk onto a farmer, or a man's land and then find things and connect it to something that was happening nowhere near where they were situated? You know what I mean? And
Right.
so you get all these different things. I don't, I guess Sheila, I'm just asking your thoughts on that because you were.
I was in the courtroom. And so I guess we have to roll back a little bit too and talk a bit about the judge, although I think despite his sentence, he seemed very fair with the defense. And again, I preface that by saying despite sentencing, because I think Anthony Olenik's lawyer, Marilyn Burns, pretty inexperienced for the high profile case before her. Um, I know I do a lot of court reporting, and I'm just going to tell it to you straight. I think the judge was really trying to help her along. Uh, so that that was evident in court, and he was giving her a lot of opportunities to make arguments that I don't think she was aware that she should have been making. So, I guess by the grace of God, they were not convicted of the conspiracy to commit murder charges. The Crown had been asking for 9 years incarceration, uh, which again prompted the judge at the time, the judge, David Lebrenz, to ask, "Are you asking me to sentence these men for a firefight with police that didn't happen?" Which sort of made me hopeful during sentencing arguments because, it felt like he thought the Crown was being unreasonable. But I did some digging. And I'm not saying that this directed the judge's his sentencing, but how could it not? We're all human beings. He's not a judicial robot. He was the Crown prosecutor at Mayerthorpe when 4 Mounties were killed by James Roscoe. James Roscoe killed himself, but he was the prosecutor who negotiated the guilty pleas with the 2 men who gave Roscoe the firearm used, Dennis Cheeseman and Sean Hennessy. Sean Hennessy received 10 years for manslaughter. Dennis Cheeseman received 7. So I was of 2 minds. I thought, okay, well, this judge is really not going to have any patience for people who are accused, although acquitted, of conspiracy to murder police officers. And given that the Crown was offering 9 years when the guys who pled guilty to manslaughter with 4 cops dead got 10 and 7 years, it seemed too high. And in his prosecutorial experience, probably too high for David Lebrenz. But they were sentenced to Dennis Cheeseman style, time behind bars.
Can you walk me through the Dennis Cheeseman story, just for myself and the listener? What happened there?
So James Roscoe, he was the local madman in Mayerthorpe. Um, I think they were going to do a repo there. It was sort of a repo gone wrong. Cops were called. James Roscoe was hiding out on his property. And in the end, he killed 4 police officers. Dennis Cheeseman and Sean Hennessy, they were accused of providing the firearm to the local madman there. However, they didn't know, or at least that's what they say, and I don't really have any reason to believe them, that they knew what he was going to use it for. But 4 cops were dead. And I think the community and the country really, because it was a national tragedy, if you're old enough to remember that, people wanted closure and they wanted somebody responsible. And James Roscoe killed himself. So these 2 young men
That's
were held responsible.
Forgive me, 2005? Am I
I
am
think
I
so. I think
uh,
that's about right.
why didn't I just look it up, folks? That would be smart, you know? Mayor Thorpe tragedy, what yes, March 2005.
Yeah.
Okay. So, forgive me. Maybe I'm wrong here, and you can give me some, much needed sounding board, from somebody who has been in and around the media and everything else that's gone on in the last little bit. 2005 to now,
Mhm.
specifically what happened in Coutts, which ties to what happens in Ottawa. In my mind, maybe I'm wrong,
Yep.
but you go. I go back to 2005. What the heck was going on in 2005? Sean was a different guy. That is for sure. I'm sure Sheila could say the
Well,
same
we all
thing.
were. Yep.
Different woman. Um, but like there wasn't all the things that were making society go utterly insane. If you
Yep.
go to the time where all these protests are going on nationwide, there's a group of people who can't leave the country, who are being told they're clogging up hospitals and that maybe there should be preferential treatment given to certain types of folk, certain headlines in Toronto newspapers
Yep.
calling, on and on this goes. So I look at it and I go, okay, while I understand, they go back to 2005 and there's some things there. And I just understand it's just to give, you know, like this was in his experience dealing with this.
Exactly.
I'm like, yeah, but the situation is, like,
Completely
insanely
different.
different.
Right,
Insanely different.
not a shot was fired. There was a lot of talk, and unlike a lot of people commenting, I did read what was called the ITO. So that's the sworn information from the RCMP, including screenshots of text messages between the men. I did read that. Um, we were unable to report on it, of course, because of the publication ban. But unlike a lot of commenters, I've seen that, and I've seen that from pretty well near the very beginning. Um, and there was a lot of bravado going back and forth. And there was a lot of talk
What do you
about,
mean bravado?
you get a bunch of guys hanging around, talking about how, uh, how
Just
they're going to
just
make
so
a strong stand. They're going to make a strong stand for the future. There's a lot of that going around. Um, Go
just so
ahead.
I'm clear, because I'm kinda, once again, I wanna make sure that I understand this correct. So you've seen these text messages, but you can't say exactly what was on them? Or I'm just wondering, you're hesitating, well, this is kinda what it said. Or are you not allowed to say that?
No, since these guys have been sentenced, the publication ban is over.
It's
But
over.
yeah, it's gone. Um, I just wanna make sure that I'm speaking verbatim and not just
Sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
recalling because
yeah.
it's like 2 years ago, right?
I just see the hesitation, Sheila, and I'm like, "Oh, wait, I don't wanna miss anything."
So there was talk about going to war with the police. Now, what does that mean? The thing is, and I think the point was made very well in court by Catherine Bayak, that's Chris Carbert's lawyer. She said there may have been talk specifically about going to war. It may have been mentioned to the undercover operators who mysteriously don't have any records about the things that were said. But at
Right.
the end of the day, when opportunity for said war, a standoff with the police happened, they surrendered peacefully.
Correct.
They when came the flashpoint for war, it didn't come. They surrendered peacefully, which means that all of their talk of war was probably just guys being guys. And that's not a crime.